All right, we will go ahead and get started here. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Steve Jones, and I'm the Commercial Sales Administrator here at Solar Holler. Today, Dan Conant, Solar Holler's founder and CEO, will be going through the details of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, and its expansion of financial incentives to churches, nonprofits, and other non-taxed entities. We'll be covering what the IRA means for communities in Appalachia, as well as the benefits that it will provide. After that, we'll open up the conversation to your questions. Everyone is muted currently, so please post your questions in the Zoom chat at any time, or you can wait until the Q&A. I'll also be putting my contact information in the chat as well. If you have any questions and they don't get answered during the webinar, please reach out to me and let me know. This webinar is also being recorded, and we'll send a link out once it's available. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dan Conant.
Great. Thanks, y'all, for joining. I'm really excited to chat with you today. The Inflation Reduction Act that passed last year is just enormous for houses of worship and faith communities nationwide, but particularly here in Appalachia. Before we get into some of those details, I did want to give a little bit of background first on who we are as a company. Steve will be driving the slide deck here as we go. But just a little bit about us. We got going in 2013. I'm from Shepherdstown, West Virginia, in the Eastern Panhandle. And one of the things I'm most proud of here at Solar Holler is that we are unapologetically West Virginian and Appalachian. Our entire mission from the start has been making solar affordable for nonprofits and folks who can really benefit from it around Appalachia. So when everybody else was focusing on California and Massachusetts, we decided that, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do this for real here. We're going to do it in West Virginia and for this state that we love. At this point, we've got over 100 team members doing everything from the initial design and utility bill analysis through installation and service and finance and everything along the way. So we've got just an amazing gang of folks that we've pulled together over the last decade. We have all of our installations are done in-house with all union crews. In 2020, we joined up with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the oldest electrical union. We've also partnered with the Carpenters Union. So we've really made sure that as we build up this clean energy industry here in Appalachia, that we don't take a step backwards on union membership. So we've been really proud to be leading the solar industry on that front. And over the past 10 years, we've built more than 1,300 solar projects across West Virginia and Kentucky and Ohio and now Western Maryland and Southwestern Virginia. But the vast majority of those are in West Virginia. And we're here to talk today about the incentives and how this can all work for nonprofits and churches. We actually got our start, or I got my start when I was creating Solar Holler. All of our early projects were designing creative financing and legal structures to help churches and libraries and homeless shelters go solar. So next slide, please. Cool. We also are what's called a benefit corporation. So actually, this came out of the world of Ben and Jerry's, but the guys, Ben and Jerry, were forced to sell their company to Unilever, even though they didn't want to, because at that point in the late 90s and early aughts, there was a requirement that corporations maximize profits for shareholders. And no matter how much they kicked and screamed about it, they weren't able to avoid that. So we learned the lesson from there and actually built into our corporate charter worker protections and the ability to give away profits or to give away projects to nonprofits and promote Appalachian revitalization into the actual charter and put those on an equal playing field with profits. So we're part of a very, very small group of companies nationwide that are benefit corporations to kind of protect that social mission that's at the core of everything we do here. Next, please. Cool. So like I mentioned, we started with Shepherdstown Presbyterian Church, which is my home congregation. This project went live back in 2014, and it was our very first project out of the gate. Solar Holler provided all the financing for the project, and we actually did a really cool campaign where we had members of the church agree to let us install little remote controls on their water heaters. And we registered all of those water heaters as a power plant on the regional grid. And my wife started day trading water heaters into this real-time grid. And we used all the profits, or we used all the revenues that we were getting from stabilizing the voltage of the power grid. We took all the revenues from that and put it into a fund so that we could give away solar to first the Presbyterian Church, and then the Harpers Ferry Public Library, and then the Harmony House homeless shelter in Huntington. And so for the first 3 years as a company, that's all we did was use this really obscure section of the electricity market to build a virtual power plant so that we could give solar away to amazing nonprofits around the state. So that was our beginning as a company. We've come a long ways since then, and things have gotten easier. The entire reason we had to do that was because I got shut down by the state when we tried to do a power purchase agreement for the church, where the state, where Solar Holler was going to own the system, take all the tax credits behind the scenes because the church couldn't get them in the first place, and then sell the power. Well, I got shut down by the state, which said that only the utility was allowed to sell power. And without that, we lost access to all the tax credits. So we had to get really creative. This is how we did it, with this crazy network of water heaters. And then from there, we went on a 9-year lobbying effort to get the rules changed. It was crazy to me that that Google and Goldman Sachs and like all these big Wall Street banks could take advantage of all these tax credits, but a church and a library and a homeless shelter couldn't. It was just absurd to me. So we started lobbying, and the Inflation Reduction Act that passed last year is the result of that effort. So really proud of the team and everything we've done here, and that mission that we set out on a long time ago. So because of all those efforts, we've not only made this more accessible for churches in our region, but also we've really made an impact nationwide. Next slide, please. So the Inflation Reduction Act passed last July, got signed into law in August, and it actually went into effect on January 1st. So the biggest change from a tax exempt perspective is that for the first time, nonprofits and tax exempt entities are able to convert the investment tax credit into a grant from the U.S. Treasury. Up until now, that was impossible. It just couldn't be done. And now Treasury is putting in place all those rules. We're still waiting on the final rules around the bureaucracy of how this is going to be done. But in the law, it says that tax exempt entities will be able to apply to Treasury and have that tax credit converted into a grant. So we're going to go through a lot more details on how to calculate this and all the different incentives at play, but that's the headline. Nonprofits can now benefit. Next slide, please. In addition to qualifying for the 30% base tax credit, there's a bunch of other new incentives that were put into place, really with the target of rebuilding the economy in coal country, as well as onshoring a ton of the manufacturing that goes into the clean energy supply chain. So the biggest one from the two biggest ones from our perspective are an American-made tax credit. So if you use American-made panels or carports or inverters, if you surpass a certain threshold that is being made in America, you'll qualify for an extra 10% of the system cost. Fortunately, we get our panels from a factory in Georgia, near the southern end of the Appalachian Trail. So all our panels are made in America, and even though we're still waiting on the final rules for exactly what it means to be American, like does all the glass and aluminum, or does every tiny little bit have to be manufactured in America? So we're still waiting on those final rules, but we're pretty confident that we'll be able to, all of our projects will be able to qualify for that. So that's a big piece that's going to drive the cost of these projects down even further, while also incentivizing more factory jobs in the U.S. There's also a 10% energy community credit, which was really crafted for coal country, and I'll get into the definition of that on a following slide. And then finally, there are low-income community credits, as well as credits for getting electricity at below market rates to low-income people. So we'll go through all these details, but high level, those are all the new incentives that are in place. Next, please. Okay, so as far as the energy community tax credit, this is the biggest thing for us in West Virginia. You'll qualify for an extra 10% tax credit or grants if you're a nonprofit, if the project is in an energy community. The definition of what an energy community is right here. It's census tracts that have seen a coal mine close since 1999, or adjacent census tracts, or census areas that have seen a coal power plant close since 2009, or importantly, metropolitan areas that have at least 0.17% of their workforce in fossil fuels. So that ends up covering almost all of West Virginia. These maps are not final. These are early modeling that some of our friends have done. But we took a screen grab of Appalachia here. You can see it covers most of West Virginia. That giant blue blob in the middle is the vast majority of the state. The areas that we don't expect to be covered by this are going to be the Eastern Panhandle. So Jefferson, Berkeley, Morgan. You can see a little white spot in the middle. That's Putnam County. And then Barbersville. So there's a few spots that won't cover it, but the vast majority of West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, this credit was made for coal country, so it makes sense. Secondly, we've got the low-income community credit. The rules, these were the first rules released about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. This is going to be the toughest one to use, but I wanted to lay out how it can be used. The credits will be allotted in competitive grant cycles, or competitive application cycles. So there will be 1.8 million kilowatts, so 1.8 gigawatts per year, this year and next year. However, there's going to be a single nationwide pool of credits. So folks in West Virginia are going to be competing against folks in California and Florida. Like there's no allotment by state. There are 4 separate categories. So if you are in a low-income census tract, that'll be one pool. If you're on tribal lands, that'll be in another pool. If you've got subsidized housing, either through USDA or HUD, that'll be another pool. And then finally, community solar for low-income subscribers. The subsidized housing and low-income subscriber application cycles will be in we don't have an exact date yet, but sometime in Q3, so July or August expected, that they'll start taking applications. And those projects must be shovel ready. You cannot have already built them. And the U.S. Department of Energy is going to take all those applications nationwide and award allotments based on that. So we expect this to be extremely competitive. We're kind of making the recommendation to folks that they really don't count on this, but if you get it, it's awesome. And we'll, as the application process comes out, we'll be able to handle that for folks or help submit those applications. But still waiting to see exactly what that looks like. Next slide, please. Okay. Next up, we have the American-made tax credit. So that is an extra 10% if the solar facility meets domestic content requirements. So that means 40% of the equipment cost must have been manufactured in the United States. So, and if you're doing ground mounts or like large ground mounted facilities, 100% of the iron and steel have to have been in the US. But for roof mounts, for roof mounted systems, we're dealing with the 40% criteria. So if you have American made modules, well, even if the inverter came from Japan, for instance, then you would qualify for that. So the easiest and probably the easiest way to get to this is going to be using American made panels and modules. And like I said earlier, we're still waiting on the final rules for exactly how they calculate that and the list of solar panels that will qualify or be certified for that. Want to show off some pictures. We've worked with probably close to a dozen churches across West Virginia at this point, including Catholic Charities. This is Blessed Sacrament in Charleston. I've worked with Lutheran Church in Morgantown, lots of Presbyterian churches, since that's who we started with. But then, of course, we also do these large installations for, law offices, chiropractic offices, poultry houses, in addition to all of our residential stuff. The interesting thing to note on these is, just from a technical standpoint, actually, can you go back to the previous one? On rubber rooftops, we actually don't need to penetrate the roof at all. We have these ballast trays. Oh, no, other way.
Sorry. There we go.
Okay. I was saying on the flat roofs, if you can go to that one. Yeah. You can see for these types of situations, we don't penetrate the rubber roof, and instead we lay down these trays and weigh them down. So we do structural engineering to make sure that the roof can hold that, and we're able to preserve the waterproofness of that. Okay, so I guess at this point, I'd like to stop before we get into some more details, but I'm happy to take questions on how any of these incentives work. And then we can go into the second part of the presentation, but open book on the IRA from y'all. Jenna just asked if you can cash in on these tax credits cumulatively. Yes, they are stackable. So you've got the 30% base, and then if you're in an energy community and using American made, then you're up to 50%. So the point of the bill was to incentivize all of these things simultaneously. So also, if you want to ask the questions just without typing, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
Right. So I have sort of a basic question. One thing that a lot of people who are curious to go solar often wonder is basically what happens when the lights are off, or when the sun's not shining.
Yep. So all the systems we do, we tie into the power grid, so that during the day when you're at church, you're probably you get a spike of usage on Sunday mornings, but during the week, people might not be there. So on a Tuesday morning when it's really sunny and no one's there, you can be sending the power out onto the grid. And the utility puts in a meter that can read power in both directions. And then at the end of the month, the utility will say, here's how much you sent us, here's how much we sent you, and you just pay the difference. That process is called net metering, and it helps us. It drives the cost of the system down because you don't need giant batteries to be able to do this.
Can the church or the organization use the solar energy credits, sell them?
You can go up to it depends a little bit on which utility you're in, but generally the way it works is that you can only build up credits. Like you can only get store credit, you can't cash out. So when we're designing systems, we'll figure out how much electricity do you use over the course of a year, over the course of a 12-month period, and we'll design the system to go up to that point, but not go above and beyond, because then you'd just be giving the electricity to the utility.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have Dominion, and I have the solar on my house, and I'm built at 105%, and I sell the solar energy credits through a brokerage house up in New York.
Okay.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, got it. So yeah, that is those are called solar renewable energy credits. Solar Holler is actually an aggregator for those in Pennsylvania, as well as about to be Virginia. And so we bundle all of those together as well, register them. We actually will offer 25 years. We'll offer to buy all of those out for the next 25 years. So we're taking on all the pricing risk. The value of those go up and down pretty rapidly. So they're just like there's no fixed pricing for them. So what we've done is said, okay, we'll buy out 25 years of those or buy out the lifetime of them and take on that risk, and then we go and bundle the thousands together and sell them to utilities in Pennsylvania. And then for folks who want to keep them, they're able to do that as well. Kenzie is asking, I'm curious about the length of the process, both for installation and application time. So easy answer first on the application time, we don't know yet. We're still waiting on the rules from Treasury, from the Department of Treasury on exactly where you apply and use this form. Like that stuff hasn't been released yet. I'm thinking my best guess at this point is it's probably going to be like 6 to 9 months to get an application, get the checks back, but we'll see. But I'd assume something like that because things can take a while when you're working through that process. As far as the installation goes, For smaller systems, we're typically looking at a life cycle. So from the time an organization says, yes, we want to do this, to when you're actually getting pumping out power, that might be like 5 or 6 months. The installation itself would be a relatively small part of that and scales up and down based on size. But a lot of the other stuff that goes in there is going to be the structural analysis and permitting with the city and permitting with the utilities and all the other stuff. So the project takes longer than just the time it takes to build. Here, let's go on to the financing pieces, because I think we're starting to get some questions about that. And so can you forward, Steve, to the... All right. So so types of finance. There we go. So there, of course, the longest running situation was folks just buying systems outright for cash. That's great if you can do it. And we're happy to work with folks who want to do that, but we also don't expect it. Turns out organizations have financing constraints and might want to use that for other stuff. The other scenarios that we've got are power purchase agreements and loans and bridge loans. So under a power purchase agreement, a solar company like us, like Solar Holler, we can build the system. Solar Holler would pay for the entire installation, all the equipment. We would put it in and own it and sell the power that is produced from the system. So that would be at an agreed to price per kilowatt hour. So I'm just pulling numbers out of the air here, and all of this gets specifically quoted to the individual building. But let's say you were paying 12 cents per kilowatt hour to the utility, which is the main rate in AP West Virginia. So 12 cents per kilowatt hour to buy it from the utility. We would come in, build the system, and sell the power at, let's say, 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So you're able to immediately reduce your utility expenditures by 25% in that case. Well, then under the PPA or under the power purchase agreement, Solar Holler is responsible for all the maintenance, all upkeep, insurance on the system, everything like that. So we would enter into a 25-year agreement to buy the power. It doesn't count as debt. So for organizations that are trying to remain debt lean, that can be really helpful. And if the system underperformed for any reason or a part went down, it's on Solar Holler to replace that part, and otherwise we don't get paid. So that's one way to do it. That is really helpful. That model is really helpful for folks who, like I said, don't want to take on debts, don't want to worry about the maintenance, and just kind of want a turnkey, just come in and we don't want to worry about anything scenario. Second option would be loans and bridge loans. We are working with a variety of folks now. For instance, the Appalachian Voices has a nice loan fund that they've put together for bridge loans for nonprofits to cover the value of the federal incentives until those come back. So they're working with, right now we're working with a homeless shelter in Huntington. They're going to be taking out a bridge loan for as long as it takes to get those incentives back from Treasury. And then once those come back, they'll pay off the loan to Appalachian Voices. We also work with other groups where we can go as far as 15 or 20 years out on loans for the cost of the system. So a church that wanted to take out a loan, they'd be able to cover the cost of the system with that, get the incentives back in 6 to 9 months or however long it takes, and then just pay a monthly payment for the 15 or 20 years until the loan is paid off. And then at that point, the organization owns the system, or you own the system all along, but eventually the loan payment would go away. So those are the types of agreements that work out for folks, and just depending on the scenario and what the congregation is looking for, we can go either which way.
So Dan, would you like for me to back up and talk about the consultation process?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's see. So I wanted to walk you through the consultation process so you know, if you're curious about solar, where you go from here. We have a link in the chat that shows you, basically you go to solarholler.com and look for this window here. You plug in your address and go from there. Once we have this information, along with information that you provide through your utility bill, we'll put together a 3D solar model. Our system designers, let me skip over here. Our system designers balance the energy needs of your physical space. They factor in things like the trees, terrain, the shape of the roof, weather patterns, and they also consider your needs as far as what you're currently paying or overpaying for electricity, and whether you need backup power during blackouts, or if you simply want to save money on your electric bill. We'll present this information to you during that consultation. So Dan already went through the financing options. I'll say that when you've decided to go solar, you've gone through the numbers, you feel pretty good about your decision to go to solar. What happens next is our technicians come out to visit the site to ensure that the details from the design phase match the reality at your church. So what we do from there is we order the equipment, we pull the permits, we coordinate with the local utility, and we install the system. And we make sure that the transition to go to solar is as hassle-free as possible. So, which basically begins with understanding what your needs are and what you're looking for. So that being said, if you have any questions about this process, we'd be happy to answer those. And if you don't have questions now, but might have questions later, I put my information, my contact information on the screen. You can email me or give me a call, and we'll take care of you. In addition to that, this webinar has been recorded, and a link will be sent out afterwards.
We just got a question from Charlie about how would you decide what size system to install in new construction? If we're able to get appliance counts, so like let's say we know what model of water heater you use and how are you heating and rough square footage, we can, it won't be perfect, but we can kind of back into it and do some early on modeling in order to figure out roughly how much electricity you're likely to use. When we're designing systems, you can either fill out the roof space, so that could be the limiting factor, or so let's say you have a fairly small roof compared to the size of the building, or compared to like let's say it's a 2 or 3 story building and you've got a fairly small roof. Well, the roof is probably going to be the limiting factor in that case. So it's case by case, but we're happy to show the math behind that, and we kind of talk things through around like, okay, are you expecting to put in electric vehicle chargers in the future, or what's going to change over time? So and then for as far as ground mounts go, we can just continue to model that out in terms of how much land and how much space do you have. Hopefully that helps. We use some pretty nifty software that allows us to model out where the sun is every hour of every day of the year and run that through all of our electrical simulations. So from that, we're able to get really precise calculations on what the system will produce. And then the question is from there, how does that pair up with usage? From Carolyn, yeah, is the consult the same for nonprofits as it was for personal? Yeah, we use the same software, same design. The biggest difference is just going to be on all the complexities of the credits and financing for nonprofits that are different from residential. And when we're working with churches, of course, it depends on the organization, what their structure is. But I know in my congregation, it's cat herding to get 40 folks all into agreement together. So we understand that there's a lot more education that goes into getting 40 folks comfortable than working with one person individually. But yes, all the same science goes into it. And anybody else have questions?
And as I said, again, if you wake up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., and you have a burning question, my email will be in the email that we send out with the link to this webinar. So we can answer your questions afterwards as well.
Great.
Okay, if no one else has anything, I want to thank you again for joining us. And we'll be sending out an email following up with the link. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out. Dan, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, just
okay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a great day. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.